Welcome back to the Takeout. Today, Oklahoma officials carried out the execution of 61-year-old John Fitzgerald Hansen, making him the 22nd person in the United States to receive the death penalty since President Trump returned to office. That's 21 more than during the same period of President Biden's term. We should note the 22 executions this year were conducted by state officials, not under the auspices of the federal government. The most recent federal executions were carried out during President Trump's first administration, 13 in all. Joining me now, Justin Mazzola, researcher for Amnesty International. Justin, thank you so much for joining us. Is there, from your perspective, any correlation between President Trump's return to office and a numerical acceleration in executions in our country?
No, I don't think so, Major. I think you have to remember that when President Biden took office, we were still in the midst of the pandemic, and we saw a huge decline in the number of executions that were being carried out at the state level. And of course, he immediately implemented a moratorium on all federal executions following the 13 that you mentioned from President Trump. So it's kind of comparing apples and oranges in terms of time frames. But what we've seen is over the last 4 years now is that the states have started to introduce executions at the rate that they were prior to the pandemic. So, we saw a complete shutdown during that year and a half period when, everybody was, home and courts weren't working and things like that. So that's kind of where we've seen that change. But really what we've seen, the difference really goes back to pre-pandemic levels.
For my audience's benefit, Amnesty International opposes capital punishment. The president, in an executive order signed his first day upon returning to office, said it was necessary at the federal level to punish the most heinous crimes and deter those heinous crimes. From your academic research perspective, what is the deterrent effect of capital punishment?
Absolutely none. We've seen now over decades that whether or not a state has or doesn't have capital punishment on the books as a sentence has absolutely no impact on the level of crime rate in a particular state or across the federal government. And so, really, what we see is that there are all sorts of issues with how it is then implemented, and oftentimes, it could be implemented on racially biased ways. It's very arbitrary in terms of jurisdictions that use it, that don't, within a particular state, for instance. And so it really does question the viability of why we still have the death penalty here in the United States to begin with.
How about the application of the death penalty at the federal level, which the president, any president, would have much more influence over?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally the same. We saw this with the 13 executions that took place under Trump. Those cases were riddled with issues, including individuals with intellectual disabilities, severe mental illness, again, arbitrariness in terms of the use of the death penalty in their case versus other similar cases within the same state, and also issues around racial bias, ineffective assistance of counsel. These are all issues that plague the capital punishment system in the states and in the federal government. And what we saw was really, over that 6-month period at the end of his term, including some for the first time in over 100 years, some executions taking place during the lame duck period of his term, is really a machinery of death that was implemented just for spectacle.
Justin, as I mentioned, 2 recent executions by firing squad. What's that about?
Yeah, as states have had more and more problems in securing the drugs that are necessary for the lethal injection protocols that they have on their books, they're now resorting to more archaic forms of execution. They've sought to bring back other things like the electric chair, and now firing squad seems to be the newest method. We've also seen the use of nitrogen hypoxia in several states, and that seems to be expanding now, as what people are saying is a more humane method for killing people. There is no humane method for killing an individual, whether that's by firing squad, lethal injection, or nitrogen gas. And so this is why it needs to be abolished once and for all in our country.
Does the firing squad capture some method or measure of the public's desire for retribution in ways possibly that lethal injection doesn't or didn't?
No, I don't think so. I think the fact that we are killing people, it's not any kind of retribution. It's revenge, and so whether that's by firing squad or lethal injection, the ultimate result is the same. And it really is a revenge killing by the state for a punishment that really should no longer exist.
Justin, there'll be some in my audience who would say, then what, if not the death penalty, do you favor? And isn't that, meaning lifelong incarceration, more expensive?
No, actually, studies have shown that it's actually more expensive between the amount of time and efforts that are put into capital punishment trials and sentencing at the first level, as well as all the rounds of appeals that usually go through. You're also talking about individuals who sit on death row for decades, oftentimes, which is a less a more expensive way to house individuals rather than in general population. These costs all add up, and it's actually less expensive to hold somebody for life than it is to kill them.
Justin Mazzola, Amnesty International. I appreciate the time and the conversation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Major.